Welcome to Caveman Sleep Stories. If you're here tonight, you're probably seeking rest, looking for something to quiet your mind and ease you towards sleep. What we often forget is that communication, real communication, wasn't always words. There was a time when understanding each other without language required knowledge most of us have never needed to learn. Tonight, we're going back to when a single sound could mean the difference between safety and danger, when hands spoke as clearly as voices do now, and when staying connected to your group meant surviving through the night. We'll follow people who read faces like we read text messages, who turned breath and rhythm and gesture into bonds strong enough to hold communities together, who understood that communication wasn't about having words, it was about being heard and being understood. If you find yourself drifting off during this journey, that's exactly what should happen. Consider subscribing so these stories can be here whenever you need them. And if this helps you rest, a like helps others find their way here too. Now, settle in. Let the noise of the modern world fade away. We're going back to a time when every sound mattered, when silence spoke volumes, and when connection happened in the space between heartbeats. Wind carries sound across the valley in the hour before dawn, when the air is cold and still, and voices travel farther than they will once the day warms and fills with other noises. A voice rises from somewhere on the eastern ridge, stretching thin through the distance, but clear enough that anyone listening can hear the pattern. 3 short calls, a pause, then 2 longer ones. This pattern means something specific, though no one could say exactly when it began to mean what it means now. Found water, fresh source, come when light allows. The throat makes sounds without thought when the body responds to the world. A sharp intake of breath when cold water first touches skin. A low sound, almost a growl, when something heavy needs lifting. These aren't planned. They emerge from the center of the chest, pushed out by effort or surprise or sudden fear. Before anything that could be called words, there are these, the sounds that the body makes simply by being alive and responding to what it encounters. A child wakes in darkness, frightened by a dream or the unfamiliar shape of shadows on the cave wall. Before the child can form any thought about what to do, a sound comes out, high, urgent, wordless, and somewhere close by, still half in sleep, someone responds with a different sound. Lower, longer, softer. The child quiets. Nothing was said, but something was communicated. Distress met with comfort. Fear answered with safety. This is where it begins, perhaps. In these sounds that need no teaching, that the body knows how to make, and the ear knows how to interpret. The sound a mother makes to a restless infant is older than memory. A low hum that starts in the chest, vibrates through the body, transfers to the small body held close. The infant feels this sound as much as hears it, the vibration soothing in ways that silence never could. This humming requires no thought, emerges automatically when a baby fusses, when small sounds of distress begin, and the infant responds, muscles relaxing, breath evening out, the hum acting like a bridge between waking distress and the return to sleep. Other adults nearby hear this humming and recognize it instantly. Someone tending to a child, everything under control, no help needed. The sound carries information on multiple levels, tells the story of care being given, of distress being answered, of the group's youngest members being protected. When someone is injured far from camp, the sounds they make carry across distance with particular urgency. Not words, not calls, but raw expressions of pain that cut through other noise, that make everyone who hears them stop and orient toward the source. The quality of the sound tells much. A sharp cry means sudden injury, perhaps a fall or a cut. A sustained moan means ongoing pain, something more serious. A series of gasps means struggling to breathe, means move quickly. This is critical. People hearing these sounds don't debate what they mean or wonder about interpretation. The body knows these sounds, has known them for longer than people have existed as a species. They trigger immediate response, bring help running, mobilize the group's collective care before any conscious thought occurs. Danger approaches, and the first person to notice doesn't stop to think about how to warn the others. The throat makes a sound, sharp and sudden, cutting through whatever other sounds fill the air. Everyone freezes. This particular sound, this specific quality of urgency and fear, means one thing so clearly that no one needs to learn it. The teaching is already written in the body, in the way muscles tense and hearts quicken when that sound reaches the ear. Run, hide. Threat is here. The alarm call changes depending on what triggers it. A predator approaching produces one type of sound, high, sharp, repeating. A dangerous animal already too close produces a different sound, shorter, more urgent, almost a bark. Environmental danger like fire or rockfall creates yet another variation, lower pitched, sustained, carrying a different type of warning. Children absorb these distinctions without formal teaching, simply by experiencing them in context. The sound happens, people respond in specific ways. The child's brain connects the sound to the response, and the meaning embeds itself. By the time a child is old enough to make these sounds themselves, they already know which sound fits which situation, have internalized the vocabulary of danger through pure observation and experience. But not all urgent sounds mean the same thing. There's the sound made when a predator is near, that sharp, high alarm that sends everyone scattering. And there's a different sound, lower, more controlled, that means danger, but not immediate. Something seen in the distance, something to watch. The ear learns to distinguish these, the way it learns to distinguish the snap of a breaking branch from the crack of thunder, the rustle of an animal in brush from the rustle of wind moving through leaves. Each sound carries information, even before anyone thinks of it as language, even before there's any deliberate attempt to create meaning. The difference matters in ways that determine survival. React too strongly to a distant threat, and energy gets wasted, attention diverted from necessary work, the group displaced from good locations for no reason. React too weakly to immediate danger, and someone dies. So the sounds evolve to carry precise information about urgency and proximity, about the type of response needed. People learn to read these gradations, to calibrate their reactions to the specific quality of the warning sound. An elder might not run at the distant danger sound, but will move efficiently towards safety, conserving energy while still responding appropriately. A young person might react more dramatically to the same sound, not yet having developed the fine discrimination that comes with experience. But both respond, both understand the basic message, and the group as a whole shifts its behavior based on these sounds that emerge from individual throats in moments of perceived threat. Pain makes its own vocabulary. A cry when a hand touches fire, different from the cry when a stone tool slips and cuts. The pitch changes, the length changes, and somehow everyone nearby knows not just that someone is hurt, but something about how they're hurt, serious or minor, sudden or building. There's information encoded in the tone itself, in the way the sound moves from the chest, through the throat, and into the air. This knowledge is older than people, shared with other creatures who also cry out when harmed, who also make sounds that communicate the nature of their distress. A person cutting themselves while working stone makes a particular sound, sharp, surprised, followed by a lower sound of frustration or assessment. Others hear this and glance over, evaluate the situation visually. Is blood flowing? How much? Does the person need help, or are they managing? The initial sound gets their attention. The visual check provides details, and usually the wounded person either waves others off or makes another sound that means, "Yes, come help." This happens in seconds, the communication flowing naturally from sound to sight to response. No one thinks about the process, no one consciously interprets. The sounds simply work, carrying their meaning automatically, triggering appropriate reactions. Burns produce different sounds than cuts. The immediate yelp when skin contacts something hot, followed often by a hissing intake of breath, sometimes a whimper if the burn is serious. Others hearing these sounds know without seeing that the injury is a burn, know that cool water will help, know to check for blistering. The sound itself contains the diagnosis, shapes the response before anyone reaches the injured person. And the burned person often continues making small sounds, sharp exhales when the pain spikes, softer sounds when it eases, creating an auditory map of their condition that others can follow even while attending to other tasks. The sounds say, "I'm managing," or "I'm not managing," or "this is getting worse," providing updates without the need for direct questioning. Contentment has sounds too, though they're quieter. The low hum of satisfaction when food is good and plentiful. The soft exhale when the body settles after long exertion. The wordless murmur between people who sit close together as the fire burns down to coals. These sounds don't demand response the way alarm calls do. They simply fill the air with presence, with the confirmation that all is well enough, that nothing requires immediate attention. They create an atmosphere of safety that everyone absorbs without conscious thought. Someone eating something particularly good makes soft sounds, little hums of pleasure, satisfied exhales, sometimes a sigh. Others hear these sounds and feel their own mouths water, their own interest in the food increase. The sounds are contagious, spreading pleasure through the group, making the meal feel more communal even when each person eats from their own portion. Children especially respond to these contentment sounds from adults, learning what foods are valued, what experiences bring satisfaction, what moments deserve savoring. The sounds teach appreciation, mark the difference between eating to survive and eating to enjoy. At the end of a long day of travel, when the group finally stops to rest, the sounds of contentment ripple through everyone. The groans of tired muscles relaxing, the sighs as packs are set down, the soft murmurs of relief. These sounds blend together into an acoustic signature of rest earned, of effort completed, of the body's reward after hard work. No one needs to announce that the day's travel is done. The collective sounds make it clear, create a shared understanding that now is time for rest, for eating, for sitting, and letting the body recover. Children make sounds constantly, experimenting with what the throat can do. Clicks and gurgles and long vowel sounds that rise and fall for no reason except the pleasure of making them. Adults listen to this play, sometimes responding with their own sounds, sometimes just letting the child's voice fill the space. This is practice, though no one names it that. The child is learning what sounds the body can produce, what the ear can distinguish, what happens when certain sounds are made, whether they bring response or laughter or quiet attention. An infant lying awake makes strings of sounds, testing their voice, discovering what happens when air moves through the throat in different ways. The sounds have no meaning yet, no purpose beyond exploration. But adults nearby listen to these sounds and sometimes repeat them back, creating a sound game that the infant finds endlessly fascinating. This back and forth, this early conversation of pure sound without meaning, builds the foundation for everything that comes later. The infant learns that sounds can be shared, that making a sound can prompt another person to make a sound back, that there's pleasure in this exchange even when nothing specific is being communicated. Toddlers discovering their voice's power often go through a phase of simply being loud, making sounds at maximum volume to hear how far they carry, to to test the effect on others, to experiment with the full range of what's possible. Adults tolerate this noise, understanding it as necessary exploration, though they sometimes gently redirect when the volume becomes excessive. The child learns social boundaries around sound, when loud is acceptable and when it's not, when sound should be controlled and when it can be free. These lessons happen through adult reactions, through gentle shushing, or allowing or sometimes joining in, creating a social education in sound that parallels the physical exploration of what the voice can do. Effort sounds synchronize when people work together, pulling something heavy, lifting something large. The grunts come at the same moments, creating a rhythm that helps coordinate the timing. One person's exhale becomes the signal for everyone to pull again. The pattern emerges without planning. Bodies working together find a shared rhythm, and sound reinforces that rhythm, helps maintain it. This is language forming perhaps in its most basic sense. Sound creating coordination, enabling action that couldn't happen in silence. 3 people lifting a heavy log onto a fire need perfect timing. One person counts with sounds, not numbers, just a rhythmic pattern that everyone recognizes. A low sound, a higher sound, then a sharp sound that means now lift. All 3 bodies strain upward at the same moment, the timing perfect because the sound organized it. Without this sonic coordination, one person would lift early, another late. The weight distribution would be wrong. Someone might get hurt. The sound makes the danger manageable, transforms a risky task into a successful one through the simple mechanism of synchronized effort. Digging together requires similar coordination. 2 people with digging sticks, working the same hard ground, develop a rhythm without discussing it. One strikes down while the other lifts up, the alternating pattern creating efficiency. And they begin to grunt in rhythm, the sounds matching their movements, reinforcing the timing, helping them maintain the pattern even as they tire. The sounds become part of the work, as necessary as the tools themselves. If one person's rhythm falters, the other hears it in the changed sound pattern before seeing it in the movement, can adjust accordingly, keep the work flowing smoothly. Comfort takes many forms, but sound is almost always part of it. Someone injured or grieving, and others gather close, making soft, continuous sounds. Not words exactly, but something like crooning, like humming, like the sounds made to calm a frightened animal. The meaning is in the tone, in the gentleness, in the continuity of sound that says, "You're not alone. We're here. This moment will pass." No one teaches this. It emerges from the same place as the alarm call, from the deep center where the body knows how to respond to distress, both its own and others. When someone grieves, the sounds of comfort from others create an acoustic blanket, wrapping around the grieving person, making the unbearable slightly more bearable. Multiple voices making soft sounds, not trying to stop the grief, but acknowledging it, accompanying it, refusing to let the grieving person be alone in their pain. The sounds don't fix anything, don't make the loss less real, but they change the experience of grief from isolation to shared witness. The grieving person hears these sounds and knows they're seen, their pain is recognized, they haven't disappeared into their sorrow but remain connected to the group even in their worst moment. Someone sick, fevered, drifting in and out of consciousness, hears voices nearby making soothing sounds. Not conversations, just presence expressed through sound. The sick person might not remember these sounds afterward, might not even be fully aware of them during, but some part of the brain registers them, knows that others are keeping watch, that sleep is safe because someone is alert. The sounds serve as a tether, keeping the sick person connected to the living world even as fever tries to pull them away from it. At night, in the enclosed space of shelter, sounds take on different qualities. They're contained, reflected back by stone walls or hide coverings. A cough in this space is louder than a cough in open air. A laugh reverberates. Whispers carry farther than they should. People learn to modulate their voices differently here, to speak more softly because the space itself amplifies everything. And in this amplification, in this enforced closeness of sound, perhaps something shifts. Sound becomes more intentional. The throat learns to create specific effects, to control volume and pitch with more precision because the space demands it. The acoustics of different shelters vary significantly. A deep cave with a narrow opening captures sound, holds it, makes even small noises seem large. People in such spaces learn to be particularly quiet, to move carefully, to whisper rather than speak at normal volume. The space teaches restraint, shows through immediate feedback that sound behaves differently here. A shallow overhang with open sides, by contrast, lets sound escape easily, requires louder voices for communication, creates a different acoustic environment that shapes how people use their voices. Some shelters have strange acoustic properties, spots where sound seems to gather, where whispers carry unexpectedly far, where certain tones resonate and amplify. People discover these spots through accident, through noticing that certain locations make voices sound different. These acoustic peculiarities become part of the shelter's character, sometimes get used deliberately. A person wanting to address the whole group might stand in the spot where their voice carries best. Someone wanting a private conversation might avoid the spot where whispers travel too well. Morning breaks differently in each season. In the cold months, the first sounds might be the crack of ice, the particular way frozen earth sounds under weight. In warmer times, it's birds first, then the movement of animals emerging from night stillness. People wake to these sounds, orient themselves by them, know what time it is and what the day might hold based on what they hear before they open their eyes. The vocabulary of sound expands beyond the human voice to include everything the world offers. Learning to interpret these sounds is as important as learning to make sounds yourself. The sound of rain approaching can be heard before the first drops fall, a change in the quality of wind, a shift in how distant sounds carry, sometimes an actual advancing wall of noise as rain moves across the landscape. People learn to recognize this, to hear the storm coming in time to seek shelter or secure belongings, or simply prepare mentally for getting wet. The ability to read these approaching weather sounds provides crucial warning time, means the difference between being caught unprepared and being ready. Different types of rain make different sounds. The light patter of a summer shower sounds nothing like the heavy drumming of a storm. Sleet has its own distinctive sound, ice crystals bouncing off stone or hide. Snow falls almost silently, creating a particular quality of quiet that's unmistakable. People learn these variations, can identify weather conditions by sound alone, can lie in shelter and know from the sound whether it's safe to go out or better to wait. The sounds teach weather reading skills, create an additional sense beyond sight and smell for understanding atmospheric conditions. The fire makes its own language, the snap and hiss, the way green wood sounds different from dry, the pop of sap, the particular roar when wind finds the flames. People sit near fire every evening and listen to this, the way others might listen to music. It's not random. There's pattern and variation, moments of intensity followed by quiet settling. Some nights the fire is talkative, full of sudden sounds. Other nights it burns low and steady, almost silent. And around this fire, human voices rise and fall, finding their own patterns in conversation with the sounds the flames make. A fire built with particular types of wood creates particular sounds. Resinous pine pops and cracks energetically, sometimes throwing sparks. always announcing its burning with dramatic acoustic displays. Hardwoods burn more quietly, with occasional deep pops, but mostly with a steady crackle. Damp wood hisses and steams before catching, makes protesting sounds as moisture escapes. People learn to predict fire behavior by listening, know when more fuel is needed by how the sounds change, can tend to fire through the night partly by ear, waking when the sounds shift in ways that mean attention is needed. The fire's sounds provide background for everything else that happens near it. Conversations, stories, songs, laughter, all of these human sounds happen against the fire's acoustic backdrop. Blend with it, create a sonic environment that becomes deeply associated with evening, with gathering, with safety and warmth. The sound of fire becomes the sound of home, of community, of the day's end. People traveling far from camp sometimes miss the fire's sounds as much as its warmth, the absence creating a feeling of incompleteness, of being away from where they belong. But sound is only half of it, maybe less than half, because when someone needs to communicate something complex, something that simple sounds can't carry, the hands begin to move. When someone returns from being gone for days, the group gathers close, waiting to hear what was seen, what was found. But words don't exist yet for most of what needs sharing, so hands do the work instead. They spread wide. The herd was enormous, more animals than could be counted. They flow in waves. The animals were moving fast but not in panic, just traveling steadily in their seasonal way. Fingers walk across invisible terrain, showing the path taken, the direction chosen, and watching eyes follow this gesture map, seeing what isn't there. The returning person's hands paint pictures in the air, creating a visual narrative that everyone can follow. Fingers spread and cluster to show how the herd was distributed. A flat palm held at different heights shows the terrain's elevation changes. A sweeping gesture indicates the vast distance covered. All of this happens in silence or with minimal sound, the hands carrying the bulk of the information, creating understanding through pure visual means. The audience reads this gestural language fluently, sees the journey in their minds, understands not just what was found, but the character of the landscape, the quality of the experience, details that would be difficult to convey through sound alone. Some gestures are so expressive they need no cultural context to understand. A hand clutched to the chest, face showing distress, fear. Arms spread wide, face joyful, abundance. Hands raised defensively, body crouched. Danger was present. These gestures tap into universal human body language, convey meaning that transcends any specific group's conventions. Even a stranger from a distant group with completely different vocal patterns could likely understand these basic gestural communications, could follow the emotional arc of a story told through body and hands, even without understanding a single sound. A child asks a question without speaking. Where did you go? The hands answer, over there, past the rock outcrop, visible from here to the river beyond. All of this conveyed in a sweep of the arm, a pointing finger, a gesture that encompasses distance and direction. The child understands perfectly. Language is happening, even though no words are being spoken. Meaning passes from one mind to another through the shape the hands make in air. The precision possible with gestural communication can be remarkable. Pointing doesn't just indicate a general direction, but combined with hand orientation and the specificity of the pointing finger, can identify exact locations. A finger pointing up at a specific angle means that ridge, not the one beside it. A hand swept along a horizontal plane means follow the valley floor. A rising gesture means climb from here. All of these directional communications happen constantly, help people coordinate movement through complex terrain, make it possible to discuss routes and destinations with clarity. Teaching happens mostly through hands. How to hold a stone to strike it at the correct angle. The teacher's hands guide the learner's hands, positioning them, applying pressure to show how much force is needed where the blow should land. Then the teacher steps back and demonstrates alone, hands moving through the sequence slowly so the learner can see each stage. Strike here, turn it, check the edge, strike again. The learner watches not the teacher's face but the teacher's hands, memorizing the pattern, the rhythm, the precise movements that turn one stone into a tool. The teaching of complex motor skills relies heavily on this hand-guided learning. The student tries, fails, and the teacher's hands intercede, adjusting grip, repositioning angles, physically shaping the student's movements into more correct forms. This tactile teaching transfers knowledge that would be almost impossible to convey through sound alone. How hard to strike? The hands show by doing. What angle works best? The hands demonstrate precisely. When is the stone properly positioned? The hands make the micro adjustments that the eyes can see but words couldn't describe. Hands can describe size and shape with precision that sounds can't match. This big, hands held a certain distance apart. This shape, fingers curved into the outline. Smooth like this, palms rubbing together. Rough like this, fingertips scratching across an invisible surface. Sharp here, one finger drawing a line along the edge of the other hand. Each gesture paints a picture in 3 dimensions, creates understanding without the need for any vocabulary beyond the movements themselves. Describing an animal never seen before requires elaborate gesture. The hands show its height at the shoulder, its length from nose to tail, the shape of its head, whether it has horns or antlers and how they curve, the comparative thickness of its legs, the way it moves. All of this gets conveyed through a series of gestures that let the listeners visualize the creature, form a mental image detailed enough that they might recognize it if encountered. The gestural description can be so precise that people ask questions through gesture. Horns like this, and the describer adjusts their gesture. No, more like this. The entire conversation about the animal's appearance happens without sound, communicated entirely through hands creating shapes in air. Texture descriptions through gesture can be particularly vivid. Rough skin isn't just indicated, but demonstrated by the way fingers scrape, by facial expressions that accompany the gesture, by the visible impression that this texture is unpleasant or interesting or remarkable in some way. Softness gets conveyed through gentle stroking gestures, through hands that compress slightly as if pressing into yielding material. Sticky substances prompt gestures where fingers pull away slowly, accompanied often by a facial expression of distaste or annoyance. Each gesture carries not just information, but attitude, not just description, but evaluation. Direction and distance live in gestures. That way, a point of the finger, far, the arm extending fully, sometimes the whole body leaning in the direction indicated, very far. Multiple gestures, perhaps miming the motion of walking, showing that many steps would be needed. Close, hands brought near to the chest. Right here, a finger touching the ground at the speaker's feet. The precision possible through these gestures exceeds what simple sounds can convey. Everyone can understand exactly what is meant because the hand creates a visual map that transcends the limits of vocabulary. Combining direction with time creates even more nuanced communication. A pointing gesture, accompanied by a hand moved from high to low, might mean go that direction in the morning when the sun is high. The same point with a different gesture means go that direction, but not until tomorrow. These combinations allow for surprisingly complex coordination, make it possible to plan group movements, schedule hunts, arrange meetings between separated parties. The gestural language becomes a planning tool, a way of organizing collective action across time and space. Numbers exist in fingers before they exist in sounds. 1, 2, 3. Fingers held up in sequence. Many, both hands spread wide, perhaps fingers wiggling to suggest abundance, uncountable quantity. None, hands turned over, palms up and empty, or brought together in a gesture of emptiness. These meanings are clear to anyone watching, require no shared language, no learned words. The hands themselves carry the information. Finger counting can become quite sophisticated. Using both hands, people can indicate specific quantities up to 10 clearly. Beyond that, systems develop. All fingers shown multiple times, or fingers counted multiple rounds, or other conventions that allow expression of larger numbers. The important quantities for survival: how many animals in a herd, how many days of travel, how many people in another group, all fall within ranges that fingers can represent clearly. The gestures make quantities visible, shared, agreed upon, creating common understanding of amounts that matter for planning and decision-making. Warnings translate especially well to gesture. Danger ahead. A hand held up sharply, palm out, the universal signal to stop. Be quiet. A finger to the lips. Watch out. A hand raised and moved in the direction of threat. Look here. A finger pointing, combined with catching someone's eye to direct their attention. Get down. A downward pressing motion with both hands. Come here. A beckoning gesture that needs no explanation in any time or place. These gestures feel ancient because they are ancient, older than words, still understood across vast differences in language and culture. The stop gesture has particular power. A hand raised sharply makes everyone freeze, overrides whatever they were doing, commands immediate attention and compliance. This gesture works at distance, can be seen when sound wouldn't carry, provides instant communication when instant communication means survival. People learn to watch peripherally for this gesture, to stay alert for the raised hand that means stop everything now. The gesture doesn't require understanding of why. That can be explained after. It requires immediate response, and that response is so deeply trained that it becomes automatic, faster than thought. Questions can be asked with hands and face together. Where? Palms up, hands spread in a gesture of not knowing, often combined with raised eyebrows. What happened? Similar gesture, but with a forward lean, an intensity that conveys curiosity or concern. When? Harder to express, but possible through gestures that mime the sun's passage, the cycle of day to night, the counting of days on fingers. Why? The most difficult, sometimes expressed simply through repetition of another gesture combined with a facial expression that asks for explanation. The questioning gesture creates an open space in conversation, a visible gap that requests filling. Someone makes the where gesture, and others understand that information is being requested, that someone needs to provide an answer. The gesture transforms interaction from one-way communication into dialogue, makes asking as easy as telling, ensures that information flows in multiple directions rather than just from knower to listener. Food gets described through elaborate pantomime. Something killed and brought back. The gesture of throwing a spear or the slice of a blade across the throat, then pointing back toward the direction traveled. Plants gathered, hands miming the motion of picking or digging, sometimes bringing empty hands to the mouth to show eating. Fish caught, hands moving in the swimming motion, the quick grab, the size shown by spacing of palms. Everyone watching can see the story unfold through these gestures, understanding not just what was found, but something about how it was acquired. The pantomime of food acquisition can become quite theatrical. Someone describing a difficult hunt might act out the entire sequence: the careful stalking, the moment of waiting, the sudden charge of the prey animal, the dodge, the throw, the strike. Watching this performance, others don't just learn what was caught, but how it was caught, what dangers were present, what skills were required. The gestural story teaches hunting technique while also entertaining, serves multiple purposes simultaneously, makes the evening retelling both educational and engaging. Describing fishing requires its own gestural vocabulary. The patience of waiting, shown by a still posture. The sudden movement of the fish, shown by darting hand motions. The grab or spear strike, shown with appropriate force and speed. The struggle of the caught fish, shown by hands fighting against each other. All of this pantomimed with enough detail that others can see the experience, can almost feel the cold water, the waiting, the excitement of the successful catch. The gestures make the absent present, bring the river to the fireside through enacted memory. Relationships and connections flow through gesture too. This is mine, a hand touching the chest or the object in question. Yours, pointing at the other person. Ours, a gesture that encompasses the group, an opening of arms that includes everyone present. Give me, hand extended, palm up. Take this, hand extended, palm down. Offering, trade, hands moving back and forth in exchange. Respect and deference shown through gesture, the lowering of the head, the stepping back, the opening of hands to show they hold nothing. Kinship gets expressed through gesture in ways that create visible family maps. A hand moved from one person to another traces relationships. This person's parent, that person's child. Siblings indicated by hands held at the same level. Cousins by more complex gestures that show branching connections. These gestural family trees make relationships visible to everyone, help children learn who is related to whom, maintain social structure through visual representation of connection. Children learn this gesture language before they can make many controlled sounds. A toddler points at something wanted long before any words form, reaches up to be held, pushes away what isn't wanted, shakes the head no, or nods yes before understanding these as words. The body teaches itself to communicate through motion, and adults respond to these signals as naturally as they respond to cries or laughter. The child is fluent in gesture before anything else, and this fluency never entirely fades, even when sounds begin to carry more meaning. The infant's first communication beyond crying is often reaching, arms extending toward a desired object or person, hands opening and closing in grasping motions. Adults respond to these gestures automatically, reading the desire, the request, the need. The baby learns that gestures work, that moving the body in particular ways causes adults to do things, provide things, change things. This early lesson in the power of gesture shapes the child's entire approach to communication, teaches that meaning can be conveyed through physical motion, that the body itself is a tool for creating understanding. But gestures have limits. They require light to be seen. They require that the person you're trying to reach can see you. In darkness, gestures vanish. Across too much distance, they become unclear. When hands are busy with work or carrying or climbing, they're not available for communication. And so the sounds and gestures begin to work together, each filling in where the other falls short. A gesture made while simultaneously making a sound, the two reinforcing each other, creating layered meaning that's richer than either alone could produce. The integration of sound and gesture creates a complete communication system. A warning sound draws attention, then a gesture indicates the direction of danger. A call across distance gets someone's attention, then gestures when they're closer provide the detailed information. Someone teaching uses their voice to direct attention. Look here. Watch this. While their hands demonstrate the technique. The two modalities work in concert, each supporting the other, together creating communication more powerful than either alone. Sometimes sound and gesture seem to split the labor of communication. Sound handles the general emotional tone and urgency level, while gesture handles the specifics. Someone makes an excited sound and everyone looks. Then gestures show what caused the excitement. Someone makes a concerned sound, drawing attention. Then gestures explain the nature of the concern. The sound is the alert. The gesture is the message. Together they form a complete package, quickly conveying both that something is happening and what that something is. Sometimes the most important communication happens with no sound at all, with no gesture either, just shared stillness. A predator is near, or might be near, or something in the air suggests the possibility. Everyone stops moving at once, so perfectly synchronized that it seems impossible they didn't plan it. But no signal was given. No one made a sound or a gesture. Something in the quality of one person's sudden stillness communicated itself to everyone else. The freeze spread through the group faster than any call could travel, and now everyone stands or crouches absolutely motionless, barely breathing, waiting. This collective freeze is one of the most sophisticated forms of communication, requiring no transmission yet achieving perfect coordination. The mechanism is perhaps peripheral awareness. Everyone always partially tracking everyone else's position and state. So when one person stops suddenly with particular tension, others register this change below conscious awareness and mirror it automatically. The freeze is contagious, spreading through the group like a wave, each person's stillness amplifying the others, until the entire group is locked in shared immobility. In this silence, other senses sharpen dramatically. The ear reaches out into the landscape, sorting through layers of sound for anything unusual. The nose works to identify scents carried on the breeze. The skin registers the slightest change in air movement. Eyes strain to catch motion in the periphery, that subtle shift that means something alive is moving out there. All of this happens in stillness so complete, it becomes its own form of communication. We are together in this silence. We are all listening. No one moves until we know. The quality of the silence varies depending on what triggered it. A freeze prompted by distant danger feels different from a freeze prompted by something close. The tension in the air, the tightness of the stillness, the duration people can maintain it, all these factors communicate information about the threat level even though no one speaks. Those who are more experienced might hold the freeze longer, trusting their ability to read the situation, while younger ones might break sooner, their nervousness overriding the discipline of stillness. But even this variation communicates. The experienced person's continued stillness tells others the danger hasn't passed, reinforces the need to remain frozen. The silence holds for a long time, maybe longer than seems bearable. A child shifts slightly, uncomfortable, and the nearest adult's hand comes to rest on the child's shoulder, not restraining, just touching, reminding, communicating through the gentlest pressure. Stay still, stay quiet. We wait. And the child does, because the tone of the moment is clear, even to someone young. This silence is not empty. It's full of attention and purpose and shared vigilance. The hand on the child's shoulder says many things without words. It says, "I know this is hard." It says, "You're doing well." It says, "I'm here with you." It says, "Keep going, stay strong, the danger will pass." All of this transmitted through simple touch, through the weight and warmth of a palm on small shoulder, through the steadiness of that contact. The child draws strength from it, finds the willpower to remain still even though every instinct screams to move, to fidget, to release the terrible tension of enforced immobility. Finally, someone makes a decision that the danger has passed or was never there. But how does everyone else know? The first person to move does so slowly, deliberately, keeping their movements visible. Others watch, reading the body language that says it's safe now, we can continue. No word is spoken, no gesture made. But understanding passes through the group anyway, visible in the way shoulders relax, the way breathing deepens, the way people begin to move again in their individual rhythms. The release from shared stillness has its own communication. The collective exhale, the slight shake of tension leaving bodies, the resumption of interrupted activities, all of these signal that the moment of danger has passed, that normal life can resume. Some people might exchange glances, small smiles of relief, acknowledgement of the shared experience. Others might touch briefly, a hand on an arm, confirming connection, celebrating survival. The transition from frozen alertness to relaxed movement is itself a form of group communication, everyone participating in the shift from one state to another. This kind of silence and the communication that happens within it becomes most refined during hunting. A group moving together through terrain, tracking prey, must learn to read each other without any overt signal. One person catches a scent and pauses. The others, watching peripherally, notice the pause and stop as well. Eyes meet briefly. A slight tilt of the head indicates direction. Everyone adjusts their path accordingly. All of this happens in silence so profound that the prey animals nearby don't startle, don't become aware of the danger moving toward them. The hunting silence is different from the danger response silence. It's active rather than reactive, purposeful rather than precautionary. In this silence, hunters are predators rather than potential prey, moving with intention, coordinating complex maneuvers, all while maintaining a quiet so complete that prey animals continue their normal activities mere stone throws away. This requires extraordinary discipline, sophisticated nonverbal communication, and deep trust among the hunters. The grammar of this silence is subtle but precise. A rapid glance to the left means look there. A slow glance means I'm checking something. Don't follow my gaze or you'll give away our attention. A frozen posture with weight still on the back foot means I'm about to move backward. The same frozen posture with weight forward means I'm about to move forward. These tiny distinctions get read accurately because everyone is paying such careful attention to everyone else. The silence demands it. Without sound to carry information, the whole body becomes the medium. Breathing patterns in hunting silence also carry meaning. A held breath indicates maximum tension, a critical moment. A slow, controlled breath means patience, waiting, no immediate action needed. A slightly quickened breath might indicate excitement, prey spotted, opportunity presenting itself. Hunters learn to listen to each other's breathing, to read these patterns, to synchronize their own breath with the group's collective rhythm. In deep silence, breath becomes one of the few available channels of communication. At night, in the close darkness of shelter, silence takes on different qualities. Bodies lie near each other, close enough to hear breathing, to feel warmth radiating from skin. Someone can't sleep, worried or uncomfortable or just restless. They shift position, trying to be quiet. But someone else hears, feels the movement, and reaches out in the darkness. A hand finding an arm, a shoulder. The touch says, I know you're awake. I'm here if you need something. No sound accompanies this. The communication happens entirely through contact and the silence that surrounds it. The nighttime silence is full of small sounds that become magnified by darkness and proximity. The rustle of someone adjusting their sleeping position, the soft sound of breath, everyone's rhythm slightly different, creating a layered pattern of inhalations and exhalations. Occasionally a sigh, a small sound of discomfort or contentment. These sounds, which would be lost in daytime's activities, become significant in night's quiet. Tell stories of who is sleeping deeply, who is restless, who might need attention. Someone having a nightmare makes small, distressed sounds, nothing loud but enough to wake those nearby. A hand reaches out in darkness, finds the dreamer, provides touch that eases them back toward calmer sleep. The intervention happens without words, guided only by sound and touch, yet it's perfectly effective. The nightmare recedes, the distressed sounds quiet. Sleep deepens again. The person who woke to help often doesn't even fully wake themselves, responding from some semi-conscious state that knows someone nearby needs comfort. Morning silence is different from evening silence. In the morning, the silence is transitional, a moment between sleep and waking when consciousness returns, but activity hasn't yet begun. People lie still, aware of others stirring, waiting for the right moment to rise. It's a peaceful silence, full of potential. Evening silence, though, especially the deep silence after voices have faded and the fire burns low, carries a different weight. It's the silence of tiredness, of completion, of the day ending and the body finally resting. Both silences communicate something about the rhythm of life, the cycle of effort and rest that shapes each day. The morning silence has a quality of gathering energy, of the body preparing for activity, of minds slowly engaging with the day ahead. People lie in this silence and plan, think through what needs doing, who will do what, where the day will take them. The silence is generative, full of unspoken intention. Evening silence, conversely, has a quality of releasing, of letting go, of the mind disengaging from planning and problem solving, settling into rest. The same silence, but with completely different emotional textures that everyone recognizes. Children learn early to interpret adult silence. When work is happening that requires concentration, adults grow quiet in a particular way that children recognize means don't interrupt. This is important. Wait until this is finished. It's different from the silence of anger, or the silence of grief, or the silence of simple contentment. Each has its own texture, its own feeling in the air, and children absorb these distinctions without being taught, learning to respond appropriately to silences they can't yet name, but fully understand. The concentration silence has a particular intensity. Adults working on something difficult or dangerous go quiet in a way that feels like a field around them, a bubble of focus that should not be penetrated. Children sense this and give space, even very young children who might not understand why they're staying back but feel instinctively that this silence should not be broken. The silence protects the worker, creates the mental space needed for precision or careful judgment. Sometimes silence becomes a form of discipline or disapproval. Someone does something foolish or harmful, and the group's response is not anger or loud confrontation, but simply a withdrawal of sound. No one speaks to the person. No one laughs at their attempts at humor. The silence becomes pointed, deliberate, impossible to ignore. It communicates far more effectively than any scolding could. You have separated yourself from us through your actions, and this silence is the distance you've created. When the silence finally breaks, when someone speaks to the person again, the reconciliation is complete. The silence and its ending mark the boundary of the transgression and its forgiveness. Being subjected to group silence is deeply uncomfortable, perhaps more uncomfortable than any verbal punishment. Humans are social beings designed to exist in networks of communication. To have that communication withdrawn, to be surrounded by people who refuse to engage, creates a particular kind of isolation that's hard to bear. The silence teaches without preaching, corrects without humiliating, makes the consequences of poor behavior immediately and viscerally felt. But silence is never truly complete. There's always something, the sound of breathing, the crackle of a fire, the distant call of a night bird, the wind moving through whatever space surrounds the group. People learn to listen to these background sounds, to notice when they change or stop. The absence of the usual night sounds sometimes means danger. Something has frightened the small creatures into silence. The sudden silence of wind means weather is shifting. Silence itself becomes readable, full of information for those who know how to interpret it. The sound of rain on shelter creates a particular kind of silence underneath it. The rain makes so much noise that other sounds become difficult to hear, creating an acoustic privacy that doesn't exist in clear weather. Under this rain sound blanket, people can have conversations that won't carry, can make sounds without worrying about attracting attention from outside. The rain creates a kind of sonic shelter within the physical shelter, wrapping the group in sound that simultaneously marks them and protects them, and then, gradually, emerging from silence and from the simple sounds the body makes without thinking, something else begins. Patterns, rhythms, sounds that repeat and come to mean. The work creates its own music. Two people scraping hides, the steady back and forth rhythm synchronizing without conscious effort until both scrapers move together. The pattern creates a beat, and in that beat, other sounds begin to fit. Exhales of effort on the downward stroke, the soft sound of leather against leather as the hide moves under hands. Small adjustments to the pattern when one person hits a tough spot, and the rhythm shifts, then finds itself again. This is communication happening through rhythm, bodies coordinating through the music of work. The work rhythm becomes almost hypnotic, allowing the mind to wander while the body maintains the pattern automatically. In this state, people sometimes begin to hum or make soft sounds that match the rhythm, adding a vocal layer to the physical pattern. These sounds help maintain the pace, provide feedback when the rhythm starts to drift, and create a shared experience that makes tedious work more bearable. The sounds aren't words, but they communicate. We're working together. We're staying coordinated. We're making progress. Three people working on different tasks near each other might each develop their own rhythm, and these rhythms interact, creating complex polyrhythmic patterns. One person digging with a regular 2-beat pattern, another scraping with a 3-beat pattern, a third pounding with a 4-beat pattern. The rhythms layer over each other, sometimes clashing, sometimes finding moments of synchronization where all the patterns align briefly before diverging again. This creates an acoustic environment that's rich and engaging, turns the work area into a kind of percussion ensemble. Stone strikes stone in patterns that become familiar. The ring of flint being worked, the particular sequence of sounds that means progress is happening, the tool is forming correctly. Everyone recognizes this sound and finds it satisfying. The way each strike produces the right tone, the right result. When the sound changes, when it goes wrong, that's instantly recognizable too. A dull thud instead of a clean ring means the stone fractured incorrectly. The work will need to start over. The pattern of sound tells the story of the work's success or failure. Expert stone workers develop distinctive rhythmic signatures. The timing between strikes, the pattern of lighter test taps followed by heavier working strikes, the pauses for examination, all of these create a unique rhythm that others can recognize. People know who is working stone even without looking, can identify the worker by the pattern of sounds alone. This acoustic signature becomes part of a person's identity, as recognizable as their face or voice. The sounds of stonework also teach through demonstration. A novice working nearby hears the expert's rhythm and tries to match it, uses the sound as a guide for timing and force. When the novice's rhythm doesn't match, the difference is audible, creates a kind of discord that both parties can hear. The expert might adjust their own rhythm slightly, exaggerating the correct pattern, providing a clearer acoustic model for the learner to follow. Teaching happens through sound, through the establishment of patterns that can be heard and imitated. Walking together creates rhythm. Feet on earth, the steady pattern of steps, the way groups unconsciously synchronize their pace over long distances. This rhythm enters the body, becomes almost meditative, and into this rhythm, voices sometimes fit. Not words exactly, but sounds timed to the steps. A low hum that rises and falls with the effort of climbing. A repeated syllable that matches the pace, helps maintain it, keeps everyone moving together. The rhythm of travel becomes a framework for sound, and sound reinforces the rhythm. Long-distance walking often produces a kind of trance state, where the repetitive motion and rhythm allow the mind to detach from the body's effort, to wander freely, while the legs continue their automatic pattern. In this state, sounds emerge spontaneously, sometimes individual, sometimes shared. A person might find themselves making rhythmic sounds without consciously deciding to. The sounds simply arising from the intersection of breath and pace and repetition. These walking sounds can be deeply personal, almost like prayer or meditation, or they can be shared with the group, becoming walking songs that everyone joins. The pace of walking dictates the possible rhythms. Slow walking creates space for longer sounds, more elaborate patterns. Quick walking demands shorter, sharper sounds that fit between the rapid footfalls. Uphill walking with its labored breathing produces sounds shaped by exertion, while downhill walking with its easier pace allows for more playful or elaborate sonic patterns. The terrain speaks through the rhythm, and the rhythm shapes what sounds are possible. Grinding grain or seeds produces a back and forth pattern, stone on stone, that goes on for a long time. The person doing this work sometimes makes sounds that match the rhythm, perhaps unconsciously. The sounds help pass the time, help maintain the steady pressure needed, turn boring, repetitive work into something that engages more of the mind. Others hear these work songs, though they're barely songs yet, more like rhythmic humming, and sometimes join in, adding their own sounds that harmonize or complement, creating layers of sound that make the work feel communal, even when each person works on their own task. The grinding rhythm is particularly steady and sustained, making it an excellent foundation for vocal experimentation. The person grinding can try different sound patterns, see what fits the rhythm, what feels good to make, what creates pleasant acoustic effects. This experimental play with sound, happening in the context of necessary work, might be where many early songs emerge, not composed deliberately, but discovered through play, then remembered and repeated because they made the work more pleasant. Children watching adults grind often try to join the song, adding their voices to the pattern even though they're not working. Adults generally welcome this, enjoying the children's enthusiasm, sometimes adjusting their own sounds to accommodate the children's attempts. This creates an intergenerational sound making that teaches children rhythm, teaches them how to match their voice to an existing pattern, teaches them the pleasure of making sounds together with others. Children naturally create rhythm in their play, clapping games, stomping patterns, repeated sounds that make them laugh. Adults watch this play and sometimes participate, adding new patterns, showing variations. This is teaching, but disguised as play, passing down the human love of pattern and rhythm, the way sound can organize and give structure to time. The children learn without knowing they're learning that rhythm is pleasure, that synchronization creates connection, that patterns can be shared and elaborated and preserved. The clapping games children invent can be remarkably complex, with intricate patterns of hand strikes, body percussion, and vocal sounds all integrated into a coordinated whole. Two children might develop a game where they alternate claps in a specific pattern while simultaneously making sounds that follow a different pattern, creating a challenge that requires significant coordination and practice to execute successfully. Adults watching these games see the cognitive development happening, see children learning to manage multiple simultaneous patterns, developing skills that will serve them in countless future tasks. Some children's rhythm games spread through the entire group of children, becoming traditional patterns that get passed from older to younger children. These traditional patterns can persist for generations, each cohort teaching the next, with small variations accumulating over time, but the basic pattern remaining recognizable. In this way, children's play becomes a vehicle for cultural transmission, preserving patterns that adults might not even be aware of teaching. Digging happens in rhythm: the lift, the thrust, the leverage, the lift again. Multiple people digging together find a shared rhythm without discussing it. The sound of their tools entering earth, the grunt of effort, the breath pattern, all synchronize. This makes the work more efficient, makes it possible to accomplish tasks that one person alone couldn't manage. The rhythm distributes effort evenly, prevents anyone from exhausting themselves too quickly, maintains momentum over hours of work. Large digging projects require many people working simultaneously, and the rhythm becomes even more important. One person might serve as the pace setter, establishing the rhythm through their sounds and movements, while others match this pace. The rhythm provides coordination, ensures that tools don't collide, that people aren't working against each other. The sounds of synchronized digging can be heard from a distance, announcing that significant work is happening, that the group is engaged in a substantial project. The rhythm of digging can be adjusted for different soil conditions. Hard, rocky ground requires slower, more forceful strikes, creating a rhythm that's deliberate and powerful. Soft, sandy soil allows for faster, lighter work, creating a quicker, more flowing rhythm. The group adjusts collectively to the conditions, finding the rhythm that works best for the material they're working with, demonstrating a kind of collective intelligence that operates through sound and physical coordination. Dancing, though no one calls it that yet, emerges from rhythm. Bodies moving together around the fire, feet stamping patterns into the earth, hands clapping, voices making sounds that rise and fall with the movement. This isn't just celebration, though it is that. It's communication of a different kind. The group expressing its unity through synchronized sound and motion, reinforcing bonds that hold people together, releasing energy that has built up over days of work and tension. The rhythm enters the body and makes it move, and the movement generates more rhythm, creating a feedback loop that can last for hours. The dancing rhythm serves multiple purposes simultaneously. It's physical exercise, burning energy, and creating pleasurable exhaustion. It's emotional release, allowing people to express feelings that don't have other outlets. It's social bonding, creating shared experience that strengthens group cohesion. And it's communication, telling stories through movement, enacting hunts or journeys or mythical events, making the abstract concrete through physical performance. Some dances develop specific meanings, become associated with particular occasions or purposes. A dance that celebrates a successful hunt looks and sounds different from a dance that mourns a death. The rhythm changes, the movements change, the sounds that accompany the movements change. People learn to read these differences, understand what kind of event prompted the dance, what emotions are being expressed and processed through the rhythmic movement and sound. Certain rhythms become associated with specific activities or meanings. The quick double beat that means danger close by. The slower repeated pattern that means come here, gather together. The steady rhythm that accompanies the processing of a large kill, everyone working in coordination. The pattern helping organize who does what and when. These rhythms start to carry meaning beyond just the pleasure of pattern. They begin to function almost like words, recognizable signals that everyone understands. The danger rhythm, once established, becomes so deeply associated with threat that just hearing it triggers physical responses even in safe contexts. Someone might make the rhythm playfully, and others will still feel their heart's rate increase, will still feel the adrenaline response beginning before their conscious mind recognizes the sound as non-threatening. This demonstrates how powerfully rhythm can encode meaning, how deeply these patterns can embed themselves in the nervous system. Memory lives in rhythm better than in isolated facts. A sequence of events remembered as a rhythmic pattern, first this, then this, then this, with each element falling on a beat. The rhythm makes the sequence memorable, makes it possible to retain and retrieve and pass on to others. Stories, when they begin to form, will use this rhythmic framework. The teller will find a beat, and the story will move in time with that beat, making it easier to remember, easier to tell the same way each time, easier for listeners to anticipate and recall. Complex procedural knowledge, like the many steps involved in preparing a hide or creating a composite tool, gets encoded in rhythmic patterns that make the sequence learnable. Each step in the process gets associated with a beat or a phrase in a rhythmic pattern, creating a mnemonic structure that makes the procedure easier to remember. The rhythm becomes a scaffold for memory, providing the structure that holds the detailed knowledge in place. At night, around the fire, rhythm becomes a kind of conversation. One person tapping a pattern with a stick against stone, another responding with a different pattern, a third adding voice to the mix, sounds timed to fit between the beats or to emphasize them. No one planned this. It emerged from the pleasure of pattern making, from the human need to create and share and elaborate. And in this rhythmic play, something like music is being born, and with it, new possibilities for communication. These rhythm conversations can become quite sophisticated, with multiple people contributing different patterns that interweave, creating complex polyrhythmic structures. The conversation has its own flow, its own logic, with patterns being proposed, answered, elaborated, varied. People listen to these rhythm exchanges with deep attention, appreciating the complexity, the creativity, the way familiar patterns get transformed through variation and combination. The rhythm of breathing becomes noticeable in close quarters. Multiple people at rest, their breath cycles gradually synchronizing, everyone inhaling and exhaling together without intending to. This unconscious coordination creates a feeling of deep unity, though no one could articulate why the moment feels the way it does. The shared rhythm of breath binds people together in the most basic physical way, reminds them of their common nature, their shared vulnerability, their dependence on the same air entering and leaving their bodies in the same ancient pattern. Synchronized breathing happens most readily in calm, restful states, when people are relaxed and their breathing naturally settles into similar patterns. But it can also happen during shared exertion, when everyone is working hard and breathing heavily, the labor creating a shared rhythm of effort and recovery. In both cases, the synchronized breathing creates a sense of unity, of being literally on the same wavelength, breathing as one organism rather than as separate individuals. And when voice enters rhythm deliberately, when someone begins to make sounds that follow a beat, something shifts in the air. Others listen differently. The sounds carry farther, mean more, stick in memory more firmly. This is the beginning of something that will eventually become music, become poetry, become all the ways humans use patterned sound to carry meaning and emotion and memory forward through time. But right now, it's simpler than that. It's just people discovering that rhythm makes sound more powerful, makes communication more effective, makes the group feel more connected. The first tentative attempts at combining voice with rhythm might be simple, just elongating certain sounds to match beats, or repeating a sound in time with hand clapping or foot stamping. But even these simple combinations create something that feels significant, that captures attention in ways that either rhythm alone or voice alone don't quite achieve. The combination is synergistic, each element enhancing the other, creating a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And around the fire, when darkness has fully settled and the only light comes from flames, when the day's work is done and bodies can finally rest, that's when voices find their fullest range. Firelight changes faces, shadows move, features become dramatic, expressions harder to read or maybe easier to read depending on the angle of the light. In this strange illumination, people gather close, drawn by the warmth and the light and the simple comfort of being together. And here, in this circle, voices fill the space in ways they don't during the day's work. Someone begins to recount what happened today. The telling is different from the simple factual report given earlier. Now there's time to elaborate, to show with gesture and voice how things unfolded, to mimic the sounds of animals encountered, to recreate the tension of a dangerous moment or the satisfaction of success. The voice rises and falls dramatically. Pauses stretch out, building anticipation. Others listen, rapt, even though they were there, even though they know what happened. The telling makes it real again in a new way. The firelight storytelling transforms events through performance. What was simply experience becomes narrative, shaped by the teller's choices about what to emphasize, where to add drama, how to pace the revelation of what happened. The teller becomes an artist, using voice and gesture and timing to create an experience for listeners that's different from, but perhaps more meaningful than the original events. The story becomes the group's shared memory of what happened, sometimes more vivid than individual recollections. Another person adds to the story, remembering a detail the first teller left out, or offering a different perspective on the same events. The story becomes collaborative, built from multiple voices, each adding texture and depth. Sometimes people interrupt, not rudely but enthusiastically, caught up in the retelling. The fire circle becomes a place where events are processed, interpreted, turned from experience into something that can be shared and remembered and passed on. The collaborative nature of firelight storytelling means that no story belongs to just one teller. Stories are group property, shaped by multiple voices, enriched by multiple perspectives. Someone might begin a story, and others add their pieces, correcting details, emphasizing different aspects, creating a multidimensional account that's richer than any single perspective could provide. This collaborative storytelling reinforces group cohesion, reminds everyone that experiences are shared, that memory is collective. Children listen to these evening recountings with complete attention. This is how they learn what they weren't present for, how they begin to understand the wider world beyond their immediate experience. They hear how adults talk about challenges overcome, dangers avoided, resources found. They absorb not just the information, but the way of telling, the patterns of speech, the dramatic pauses, the sounds made to enhance the story. They're learning to be storytellers themselves, though it will be years before they fully step into that role. The children's absorption of storytelling technique happens mostly unconsciously. They don't deliberately study how stories are told, but their brains are tracking patterns, noting what makes a story engaging, learning the rhythms and structures that make narrative work. Years later, when they tell their first stories, these absorbed patterns will emerge, will shape how they structure their telling, demonstrating that learning happened during all those evenings of quiet listening. Laughter erupts often in these evening gatherings. Someone makes a sound that imitates an animal perfectly, and everyone laughs at the accuracy, at the absurdity of a human making that sound. Someone describes their own mistake with self-deprecating humor, making the error seem funnier than it was, diffusing any criticism by getting ahead of it with laughter. The fire circle is where humor finds its fullest expression, where the day's tensions can be released through shared laughter, where the ridiculous aspects of survival can be acknowledged and enjoyed. The laughter around the fire has a particular quality, uninhibited, often building on itself, becoming almost hysterical as people catch each other's eyes and start laughing again. This kind of deep, prolonged laughter is a stress release, a way of processing the day's anxieties and fears through humor, through the recognition that despite dangers and difficulties, everyone is here, everyone is safe. There's room for joy. Questions get asked here that don't get asked during the day. Where do the animals go in winter? Why does the river rise some years and not others? What's beyond the mountains visible on the horizon? These questions might not have answers, but asking them seems important. The group puzzles over them together, offers theories, draws on collective memory of what's been observed over years. The conversation wanders, loops back, branches off into tangents. There's no hurry. The fire burns and voices continue, exploring ideas that have no immediate practical application, but that satisfy some deeper need to understand. These exploratory conversations serve important functions beyond mere curiosity. They help people make sense of their world, create explanatory frameworks that provide comfort and context. They exercise cognitive abilities, keeping minds sharp through speculation and reasoning, and they bind the group through shared wondering, through the collective pursuit of understanding, through the acknowledgement that some mysteries are worth contemplating even if they can't be solved. The oldest voices carry special weight here. They've sat at more fires, heard more stories, have access to longer memory. When they speak, others quiet to listen. They tell of times before the younger ones were born, of events that are already passing into legend. Their voices are slower, more deliberate, rich with the accumulated experience of many years. They remember patterns. This winter is like the winter 20 years ago. That herd moved the same way they moved when I was young. This long memory, preserved in their voices and their stories, becomes the group's anchor to its own history. Elder voices don't just carry information, but authority and continuity. When an elder speaks, they connect the present moment to the deep past, remind everyone of patterns that extend beyond individual lifespans, provide perspective that only long experience can offer. The younger ones listen not just to learn facts, but to understand how to think about time, how to see the present as part of longer cycles, how to trust that the group has survived challenges before and will survive them again. Songs might be forming here, though they don't have that name yet. Certain stories get told with such rhythm, with sounds that repeat in such predictable patterns, that they begin to feel like songs. The rhythm helps memory, makes the story easier to tell the same way each time, makes it more beautiful to hear. People anticipate their favorite parts, sometimes joining in on repeated phrases, creating a call and response pattern that reinforces the communal nature of the telling. The emergence of song from story is gradual and natural. A phrase that feels good to say gets repeated with the same rhythm each time. Someone realizes they can adjust their voice to make the phrase more melodic, more sing-song. Others hear this and enjoy it, encourage the teller to use that particular phrasing again next time. Over many retellings, the phrase becomes increasingly musical until it's more sung than spoken, and a song has been born from the storytelling process. Comfort passes through voices here in ways it can't during the day. Someone troubled by something, worried or grieving or afraid, can speak of it here and receive not solutions necessarily, but acknowledgement. Other voices respond with their own experiences of similar troubles, with reassurance, with the simple recognition that says your feelings are understood, you're not alone in this. The fire circle becomes a space where vulnerability is possible, where the group's emotional life can be tended and shared. The emotional openness possible around the fire happens partly because of the darkness, the limited visibility that creates a sense of privacy even in the group setting. People can speak about feelings without constant eye contact, can let tears flow without feeling as exposed as they might in daylight. The fire provides a focal point, something to look at that isn't other people's faces, making it easier to speak difficult truths, to admit fears or sorrows that might be harder to voice in full daylight. Teaching happens here too, but differently than during the day. Someone might describe a technique learned, a new way of doing something, and others lean in to hear the details. The description is careful, unhurried. There's time to ask questions, to clarify, to discuss. By firelight, knowledge passes from one person to another, not through demonstration, but through careful verbal description, supported by gesture, enriched by the patience that evening allows. This verbal teaching complements the physical demonstration teaching that happens during the day. Some knowledge is best transmitted through doing, through hands-on guidance, through practice. But other knowledge benefits from verbal explanation, from the ability to describe not just what to do but why, from the chance to discuss variations and alternatives, from the opportunity to ask questions and explore understanding. The fire circle provides the time and space for this different kind of teaching. The youngest children fall asleep during these gatherings, lulled by the sound of adult voices, the warmth of the fire, the safety of being surrounded by their group. But they sleep lightly, and the voices enter their dreams, the patterns of speech, the rhythms, the tones. Even in sleep, they're absorbing language, learning the music of human communication, being shaped by the sounds that surround them. The sleeping children draped across adult laps or curled on hides nearby become part of the fire circle's landscape, a reminder of continuity, of the next generation that will someday sit where the adults sit now, telling stories to children of their own. The adults speak more quietly once children sleep, adjusting their volume to let the small ones rest, while still continuing the evening's conversation and connection. As the fire burns lower, voices grow quieter, more intimate. Conversations split into smaller groups, pairs of people speaking softly about personal matters. The communal atmosphere remains, but within it, private communications happen, things said softly that aren't meant for everyone's ears. The fire circle accommodates both the public and the private, the shared story and the whispered confidence. These private conversations at fire's edge serve crucial functions. Partnerships strengthen through quiet talk. Conflicts get resolved through soft-voiced negotiation. Worries get shared between friends. Plans get made between collaborators. The fire circle isn't just about the whole group's communication, but also about providing a comfortable setting for the one-on-one connections that hold the group together at the interpersonal level. Eventually, someone will need to add more fuel to the fire, a task that temporarily disrupts the conversation. But the disruption is comfortable, familiar. Everyone shifts slightly as the person moves to tend the flames. New wood crackles and hisses as it catches. Sparks rise into the darkness. Faces become brighter again as the flames grow, and voices resume, continuing threads left hanging, picking up new ones, weaving together the sounds that bind the group through the long night. The fire-tending breaks create natural pauses in the evening's flow, moments when conversation can shift direction, when someone can introduce a new topic, when the collective attention can reorient itself. These breaks prevent any single topic or speaker from dominating too long, create a rhythm to the evening that keeps it engaging and varied. This is where extended communication flowers, not in the urgent exchanges of the day, but in these evening hours when there's time to explore what the voice can do, what meanings can be layered into sound, how stories can be shaped and shared. Around the fire, something more complex than simple signals and calls begins to emerge. The understanding that voices can preserve experience, can transfer knowledge, can create bonds that hold people together even when fear and hardship try to pull them apart. The fire circle is the laboratory where extended vocal communication develops. Here, people experiment with their voices, try different ways of telling, discover what works and what doesn't, refine their techniques through practice and response. The immediate feedback from listeners, their attention or boredom, their laughter or tears, their questions or silence, teaches speakers how to communicate more effectively, shapes the evolution of storytelling ability within the group. And when the fire finally dies to coals and people shift toward sleep, the voices don't entirely stop. They fade to murmurs, to soft exchanges between people lying close together, to the occasional sound of someone adjusting position or comforting a restless child. The night is never silent, just quieter, voices giving way to breath and the small sounds of bodies at rest. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again. The transition from waking to sleeping is marked by the gradual diminishment of voice, the slow fade from conversation to murmur to silence broken only by breath. This transition is itself a form of communication, the group collectively agreeing through decreasing sound that the day has ended, that sleep is now the priority, that speech can wait until morning. No one announces this transition, but everyone participates in it, creating through their individual quieting a collective shift toward rest. But before any of this elaborate evening communication can happen, before the fire circle conversations and the storytelling, skills must be passed from one person to another, and much of this teaching happens without words, or with only the simplest sounds accompanying elaborate demonstration. A child watches an adult making cordage, twisting plant fibers into string. The process looks simple but requires precise tension, exact movements of the fingers, a rhythm that can't easily be described. The adult works slowly, aware of the child's attention, exaggerating each motion slightly so it can be clearly seen. The child reaches out tentatively, wanting to try. The adult hands over a length of fiber and watches as the child attempts to imitate what they've seen. The first attempts fail. The tension is wrong, or the twist goes the wrong direction, or the fingers can't quite coordinate the necessary movements. The adult makes a soft sound, not disapproval, but encouragement, and takes the child's hands in their own, guiding them through the motion. Feel how the fingers move. Notice where the pressure applies. The child's hands move within the adult's hands, learning through the skin and muscles what the eyes alone couldn't teach. After several guided repetitions, the adult lets go and gestures. Try again. The child's fingers remember what they felt. The cordage begins to form, crude but recognizable. The adult makes a sound of approval, a lift in tone that clearly means yes. Like that, you're learning. The approval sound becomes powerfully motivating for children learning skills. They work harder, focus more intently, persist through frustration because they're seeking that sound, that vocal confirmation that they're doing well, that they're making progress. The sound becomes a reward system that shapes learning, makes children want to master skills not just for practical reasons, but for the emotional satisfaction of earning that approving sound from someone they respect. Different teachers have different sounds for approval, different tones and patterns that children learn to recognize. A particular elder's grunt of satisfaction, a parent's soft hum of pleasure, a skilled craftsperson's sharp exhale that means perfect. Children become attuned to these individual approval sounds, work to earn them specifically from the people whose respect they most value. The diversity of approval sounds creates a rich acoustic environment where learning is constantly reinforced through varied vocal feedback. Tool making requires even more patience. A young person, nearly grown, sits beside someone skilled, watching the careful work of shaping stone. The skilled person works in silence mostly, focused entirely on the task, but occasionally makes small sounds to direct attention. A quick breath in through the teeth means, watch this part carefully. This is crucial. A soft grunt of satisfaction means that blow landed perfectly. See the result. A lower sound, almost a growl, means the stone isn't cooperating. This is frustrating. The learner doesn't just watch the hands, but listens to these sounds, learning to associate them with success or difficulty, with the moments that matter most. The sounds of stone working become a diagnostic tool. The expert can hear in the sound of each strike whether it's producing the desired result, can adjust their next blow based on acoustic feedback as much as visual inspection. The learner absorbs this skill gradually, learning to distinguish between the ring of a good strike and the thud of a failed one, developing an ear for the material's voice, the way the stone itself communicates through sound, whether it's being worked successfully. When the learner tries to work the stone themselves, the teacher's hands hover nearby, not touching but ready. The learner raises the hammerstone, preparing to strike. The teacher makes a sharp sound, wait, and the learner freezes. The teacher reaches in, adjusts the angle of the core stone slightly, pulls back, makes a different sound. Now, the strike falls. The flake detaches perfectly. The teacher's hand comes to rest briefly on the learner's shoulder, a touch that communicates pride and approval more clearly than any words could. This combination of vocal direction and physical touch creates a complete teaching system. The sounds provide moment-to-moment guidance. The touch provides emotional support and connection. Together they create an environment where learning feels safe, where mistakes are expected and corrected gently, where progress is celebrated immediately. The learner develops confidence through this responsive teaching, learns to trust both their teacher and their own developing abilities. Hunting knowledge passes from experienced to inexperienced through countless small demonstrations. How to move silently. The teacher walks, exaggerating the placement of each foot, the slow rolling motion from heel to toe that makes almost no sound. The student follows, trying to match the pattern. When a foot comes down too heavily, the teacher makes a soft clicking sound with the tongue. Not that way. When the student gets it right, a different sound, a quick exhale. Yes. The corrections are gentle, constant, helping the student's body learn what silence feels like in motion. The teaching of silent movement takes time because the body must develop new habits, new patterns of weight distribution, and muscle control. The sounds the teacher makes serve as a continuous feedback loop, providing instant information about whether each step is correct. This immediate feedback accelerates learning, helps the student adjust in real time, rather than accumulating errors that would need to be unlearned later. Reading tracks requires teaching that's almost entirely visual, but sounds punctuate the lessons. The teacher crouches beside a print, points to specific features, makes sounds that draw attention to what matters. A low hum, while tracing the depth of the impression. Feel how deep this is. Consider what that means about weight, about how recently the animal passed. A higher sound while pointing to the spacing between prints. Notice this distance. This tells us the animal was moving quickly. The student looks where the sounds direct, learning to see what the experienced eye sees, beginning to read the Earth's surface as a text full of information. Track reading becomes a conversation between the teacher and the Earth, mediated through sound. The teacher's vocalizations highlight what to notice, create emphasis, direct the student's attention to the details that matter. Without these sounds, the student might look at tracks without seeing them, might miss the subtle features that tell the story of what passed this way. The sounds make visible what expertise has learned to see, bridge the gap between novice and expert perception. Processing a kill involves many people working together, and here teaching happens through inclusion. A younger person is brought into the work, given a task appropriate to their skill level, guided through it by those working nearby. The guidance is mostly physical, hands positioned correctly, motions demonstrated, but small sounds smooth the coordination. A quick breath means move this way. A soft grunt means more pressure needed. A clicking tongue means careful here, this is delicate. The sounds create a rhythm that organizes the work, keeps everyone coordinated, makes the complex task of butchering and processing flow efficiently, even when several people are learning while they work. The sounds of butchering work serve multiple purposes simultaneously. They coordinate action, preventing people from interfering with each other's work. They provide instruction, guiding learners through unfamiliar tasks. And they create a shared rhythm that makes the work feel communal rather than individual, that transforms a potentially grim task into a collective effort marked by cooperation and mutual support. Plant knowledge passes from foragers to children through many seasons of walking together. The experienced forager makes a sound, a soft call, that means stop, look here. The child comes close and watches as the adult examines a plant, touches it, sometimes smells it, sometimes makes marks on it, or tears a small piece. The sounds that accompany this examination are varied. A humming sound might mean, yes, this is the one we want, this is safe. A sharp exhale might mean no, this looks similar but notice the difference. This one would harm. The child learns through repetition, through being called to attention again and again, until their own eyes begin to see what the experienced forager sees without needing the sounds to guide them. Plant foraging education takes years because there are so many species to learn, so many subtle differences between safe and dangerous varieties. The sounds the teacher makes serve as memory aids, helping the child associate particular plants with particular sounds, creating acoustic tags that make the botanical knowledge more memorable. The child might remember the sharp exhale sound and associate it with the toxic plant, the remembered sound helping them avoid danger even before conscious recognition occurs. The seasonal nature of plant knowledge means that teaching happens in cycles, each plant appearing in its time, being pointed out and discussed, then disappearing until next year. The sounds help bridge these temporal gaps, help children remember from one year to the next what they learned in previous seasons. When a plant reappears, the child might remember the sound the teacher made last time, use that memory to access the associated knowledge about edibility, preparation, or use. Caretaking skills transfer from experienced adults to those who will eventually raise young ones of their own. A baby cries, and an inexperienced person tries to comfort it, but doesn't know how. Someone experienced steps close, makes a soft sound. Let me show you. Takes the infant, adjusts the way it's held, begins making a rhythmic shushing sound while rocking gently. The baby quiets. The experienced person hands the infant back to the learner, stays close, guides their movements with small sounds and touches. Rock like this. Softer sounds here. Keep the rhythm steady. The learning happens through the body and through the sounds that shape what the body does. The sounds of infant care, the shushing, the humming, the soft vocalizations, are themselves a language that babies respond to instinctively. Learning to make these sounds correctly is part of learning to care for infants. The inexperienced person must learn not just how to hold a baby, but how to sound to a baby, how to create the acoustic environment that soothes and comforts. This acoustic aspect of caregiving is as important as the physical aspects, and experienced caregivers pass it on through demonstration and guided practice. Weather reading gets taught through pointing and sounds. Storm approaching, and someone experienced makes a sound to get everyone's attention, then points to the sky's color, the quality of light, the way the wind has shifted. The sound made is serious, means pay attention. This matters. Then, pointing to the direction they'll need to go for shelter, another sound means move soon. The inexperienced watch and learn to connect the signs in the sky and air with the appropriate response. Next time similar conditions appear, they'll recognize them and know what to do without needing the teacher's guidance. Weather signs are subtle and complex, requiring years of observation to master. The sounds the teacher makes help establish the importance of particular signs, create urgency around certain observations, mark the difference between interesting weather changes and dangerous weather changes. The inexperienced person learns not just what to look for, but what level of concern each sign should provoke, calibrating their responses to match the experienced person's vocal reactions. Fire tending is taught through observation and incremental participation. A child is allowed to place small sticks on an established fire, learning to feed it without smothering it. An adult watches, makes encouraging sounds when the sticks are placed well, a gentle correcting sound when they're positioned poorly. Gradually, the child learns the fire's needs, how to read its hunger, when to add fuel and how much. The sounds diminish as competence grows. Eventually, the child tends fire alone, the skill fully transferred, requiring no more guidance. Fire tending mastery comes through repeated practice with vocal feedback. The child learns to read the fire's state. Is it hungry for more fuel or still digesting what it has? The adult's sounds confirm or correct these readings, help the child develop accurate interpretation skills. Over time, the child internalizes these judgments, develops their own sense of what the fire needs, reaches the point where they can tend fire as competently as any adult. Some knowledge transfers through mistakes being made and corrected. A young person prepares food incorrectly, perhaps not cleaning it thoroughly or cooking it wrong. Someone else notices, makes a sound, not alarm but concern, and comes over, takes the food, shows the right way, makes sounds that emphasize key steps. Like this. See? Not that way, this way. The correction isn't harsh, but it's clear. The learner watches closely, knowing this matters, storing the information carefully. The mistake becomes the lesson, often remembered better than if things had gone right the first time. Mistakes create powerful learning opportunities because they're emotionally salient. The embarrassment of getting something wrong, combined with the relief of being corrected gently, creates a strong memory. The sounds the corrector makes while demonstrating the right way become deeply associated with the correct procedure, making it easier to remember in future. The learner thinks not just of the steps involved, but of the sounds that accompanied learning those steps, creating a multisensory memory that's more robust than visual memory alone. Hide preparation involves so many steps that teaching it requires patience over long periods. The teacher works through each stage with the learner watching, participating in the easier steps, gradually being trusted with more complex parts. Throughout this teaching, sounds mark transitions, a different sound for each major phase: scraping, softening, smoking. The sounds help organize the knowledge, create mental markers that make the sequence memorable. The learner eventually knows what comes next, partly by remembering the sequence of sounds that accompanied each step during their training. The complexity of hide preparation makes it an ideal subject for sound-based learning aids. With so many steps to remember, and each step requiring specific techniques, the sounds serve as chapter markers in the larger process. The learner can mentally review the entire procedure by recalling the sequence of sounds, using them as waypoints to structure their memory of the full process. Navigation knowledge passes through experience shared over many journeys. The experienced guide makes sounds at important landmarks. This turn, remember this place, this is where we always rest. The sounds become associated with locations, help build mental maps. The learner absorbs not just the visual memory of landmarks, but the sound that marks each one, creating a layered system of memory that makes the landscape more knowable, less likely to confuse even in poor conditions. The acoustic marking of landmarks serves multiple functions. It helps with memory through creating multisensory associations. It provides reassurance on future journeys. Hearing the familiar sound at the expected location confirms that the route is being followed correctly, and it creates a shared language for discussing routes, where people can reference locations by the sounds associated with them, rather than needing elaborate verbal descriptions. Conflict resolution skills are observed and absorbed by younger members, watching how elders handle disputes. The tones used, the sounds that calm or that emphasize, the way voice can diffuse tension or establish authority. These lessons aren't taught explicitly but learned through witness. A young person watches an elder manage a difficult situation through careful use of voice and presence, sees how certain sounds make people relax, how others command attention. This knowledge stores itself away, available when needed in future situations. The management of conflict through voice is a sophisticated skill that takes years to develop. Young people watching conflict resolution see how tone matters as much as content, how a soft voice can be more effective than a loud one, how strategic silence can speak louder than words. They absorb these lessons gradually, building a repertoire of vocal strategies for managing social tension that they'll draw on throughout their lives. And woven through all this teaching is the physical presence of the teacher, the patience in their voice, the care in their demonstrations, the approval when progress happens. The sounds they make while teaching are almost a language in themselves. The encouragement, the correction, the emphasis, the approval. These sounds shape learning as much as the visual demonstrations do, create emotional contexts that make the lessons stick. The learner remembers not just what was taught, but how it felt to be taught, the tone of the teacher's sounds, the safety of being guided by someone who knows the way. The emotional dimension of teaching sounds cannot be overstated. A harsh, impatient tone can shut down learning, make the student defensive and fearful of mistakes. A warm, encouraging tone opens learning, makes the student willing to try, to fail, to try again. Teachers who understand this use their voices deliberately to create emotional environments that support learning, that make the difficult process of acquiring new skills feel safe and rewarding. The teaching happens constantly, embedded in everyday's activities, until the learner becomes the teacher and the sounds of instruction pass from their voice to the next generation's ears. Knowledge accumulates this way, preserved not in any permanent form, but in the living transmission from person to person, from voice to ear, from demonstration to imitation, from correction to mastery. The sounds that accompany this teaching are simple, but they carry the weight of survival, the accumulated wisdom of countless generations passed forward through voice and gesture and patient repetition. This unbroken chain of teaching, stretching back through time, creates cultural continuity. Each generation learns from the previous one, not just facts, but the entire approach to learning, the sounds that mark teaching, the patience that makes learning possible. The continuity of these teaching sounds across generations creates stability in the culture, ensures that knowledge doesn't just persist, but the methods of transmitting knowledge persist, creating a self-reinforcing system of cultural preservation. But teaching isn't only for those nearby. Sometimes the distance is too great for hands to touch, for faces to be seen clearly, and then other sounds emerge, designed specifically to span space. The valley spreads wide below, distances measured in hours of walking. Two groups separated, one high on the eastern slope, the other somewhere on the valley floor, obscured by terrain. The group above needs to signal their location, let the others know where they are. A voice rises, carrying a call that's not words but pure sound, shaped to travel. 3 long notes, a pause, 3 more. The pattern repeats, giving the sound multiple chances to reach across distance. The physics of sound transmission shape these distance calls. Lower frequencies travel farther, but convey less detail. Higher frequencies carry detail, but attenuate quickly. The 3-note pattern finds a middle ground, using tones that carry reasonably well while remaining distinctive enough to convey specific meaning. The pause between repetitions allows for echoes to die away, makes each repetition clear and separate, prevents the sound from becoming a muddy blur. On the valley floor, someone hears it. The sound comes from far away, distorted slightly by distance and wind, but the pattern is clear. 3 and 3. Location signal. The listener gauges direction by the sound source, roughly east and high. Responds with a different pattern. 2 short calls, a pause, 2 more. Message received. We hear you. The exchange takes minutes, but accomplishes what needs accomplishing. The groups know where each other are, can coordinate their movements, won't lose each other in the vast landscape. The responding call confirms not just reception, but comprehension. The different pattern, 2 notes instead of 3, signals that the message was understood, that this is a response rather than an independent call. This back and forth creates a simple but effective long-distance dialogue, allowing separated groups to maintain contact and coordinate even when visual contact is impossible. Different calls carry different meanings, distinguished by pattern and tone. Danger has its own call, one that demands immediate attention. The pitch is higher, more urgent, the pattern more frantic. Help needed sounds different. Similar urgency, but a sustained note that repeats, that carries desperation. Found something good is calmer, often includes a rhythm that suggests celebration, that makes anyone hearing it want to respond, to come and see. Each call is distinctive enough that even across great distance, even when wind distorts the sound, the basic meaning comes through. The emotional content of distance calls gets encoded in their acoustic properties. Urgency comes through in rapid repetition, in high pitch, in the quality of the voice that makes the call. Calm information comes through in slower, more measured patterns. Celebration comes through in rising tones, in rhythmic patterns that almost sound like dancing. These emotional qualities help ensure that even if the exact pattern gets lost or distorted, the basic message, this is urgent, versus this is routine information versus this is good news, still communicates clearly. Children learn these distance calls early, first by hearing them used and understanding what happens in response, then by practicing them under supervision. An adult teaches a child the location call, makes them repeat it until the pattern is exact, the pitch carries properly, then sends the child a short distance away to practice, correcting when the call isn't quite right, approving when it is. Eventually, the child can produce the call reliably, adding one more voice to the group's network of long-distance communication. The practice of distance calling develops vocal control and breath support. Calls that need to carry must be produced with strong, sustained breath, with clear articulation, with enough volume to travel without straining the voice. Children learning these calls develop their vocal abilities generally, strengthening their voices, improving their control, gaining capacities that serve them in all vocal communication, not just distance calling. The calls adapt to the environment. In forests where sound doesn't carry as far, the calls are sharper, higher pitched, designed to cut through foliage. In open terrain, they're lower, longer, taking advantage of the way sound travels across emptiness. Groups living in different landscapes develop slightly different calling traditions, each optimized for the environment they inhabit. But the basic patterns remain similar enough that groups encountering each other can recognize the intent of the calls, even if the exact execution is different. Environmental adaptation of calls demonstrates sophisticated understanding of acoustics. People learn through experience which sounds carry best in their particular landscape, adjust their calling accordingly. This knowledge gets passed down, becomes part of the group's acoustic culture, creates a calling tradition that's specifically tuned to the environment the group inhabits. Some calls are specifically for coordinating movement during hunts. A scattered group closing in on prey needs to communicate without startling the animals. The calls here are softer, more like whistles or bird-like sounds that don't register as human threats to the prey. One call means hold position. Another means advance slowly. Another means the prey is moving your direction. The hunters have practiced these calls until they can produce them reliably under stress, until the meanings are so ingrained that response is automatic. The development of prey-neutral calls represents sophisticated vocal mimicry. The sounds must be similar enough to natural sounds that prey animals don't recognize them as threats, yet distinctive enough that human listeners can distinguish them from actual bird calls or other natural sounds. This narrow window requires careful practice and refinement, creates a specialized subset of calls that only work in hunting contexts. Return calls serve to guide someone back to the group. A person gone too long, perhaps disoriented, perhaps having traveled farther than intended. The group calls to them, a steady pattern that serves as an acoustic beacon. The lost person follows the sound, calling back occasionally to let the group know the sound is reaching them, that they're making their way toward it. The exchange continues until the person rejoins the group. The final call, one of relief and welcome. The acoustic beacon function of return calls provides reassurance on multiple levels. The lost person knows they're not alone, that the group is actively trying to guide them back. The group knows the lost person can hear them, is responding, is making progress. The dialogue through calls transforms a potentially frightening situation into a managed one, uses sound to bridge the distance until physical reunion becomes possible. Warning calls can specify the type of danger. A call for predator sounds different from a call for environmental danger like fire or flood or falling rocks. The distinction isn't always perfect, but it's usually enough to give everyone some idea of what they're responding to, whether to grab weapons or simply run, whether to look to the ground or to the sky or into the trees. This specificity in distance calls represents sophistication, a development beyond simple alarm into categorized warnings. The categorization of warning calls allows for more appropriate responses. An environmental danger warning might prompt movement in a specific direction away from the threat. A predator warning might prompt gathering together for defense. Fire warning might prompt looking for smoke to determine direction and distance. Each type of danger requires different responses, and the calls make it possible to begin responding appropriately even before the danger is visible. Celebration calls bring scattered people together at the end of the day. One person begins, sending out the call that means, "We're here, come to us." Others hear and respond from their various positions across the landscape, creating a brief chorus of calls and responses that maps everyone's location and initiates the regathering. These calls often carry happiness, relief, anticipation of reunion. They mark the transition from the scattered work of the day to the communal evening. The chorus of celebration calls creates a moment of acoustic community, where everyone's voice is heard simultaneously or in quick succession, where the calls overlap and interweave, creating a brief polyphonic expression of group unity. This auditory coming together precedes and facilitates the physical coming together, uses sound to begin the process of regathering before people have actually moved. Young people practicing their range will sometimes call just to call, testing how far their voice will carry, seeing who will respond from what distance. Adults tolerate this play, understanding it as skill building. Sometimes adults will respond from unexpectedly far away, teaching the young person that their voice carries farther than they realized, expanding their confidence in their ability to communicate across distance. The playful practice of calling develops not just technical skill but confidence. Young people learn that their voices are powerful, that they can reach across vast distances, that they can make themselves heard. This confidence in one's own voice has implications beyond distance calling, affects how confidently people speak in all contexts, shapes their sense of themselves as communicators. Some calls are specifically between pairs, partners, parent and child, close friends. These calls have personal variations, slight differences in pattern or tone that make them recognizable to the intended recipient. A parent calls for their child with a variation unique to them. The child hears this among other sounds and knows this call is meant for them specifically, responds accordingly. This personalization of calls creates acoustic bonds between individuals, ways of being connected even across distance. Personal calls create intimate acoustic relationships. The sound of a loved one's call becomes deeply familiar, instantly recognizable, emotionally resonant. Hearing that particular pattern triggers not just recognition, but emotional response, relief, joy, anticipation. The personalized call carries not just information but relationship, not just meaning, but connection. Echo can be used intentionally in terrain that produces it. A call made in a canyon or against a cliff face, knowing the echo will amplify and repeat the sound, making it carry even farther. People learn where these acoustic sweet spots exist in their territory, use them strategically when they need their calls to reach maximum distance. The landscape itself becomes part of the communication system, a feature to be understood and utilized. The strategic use of echo demonstrates sophisticated understanding of acoustic environments. People learn that certain locations amplify sound, certain orientations cause calls to carry differently, certain times of day offer better acoustic conditions than others. This accumulated knowledge about the acoustic properties of the landscape becomes part of the group's territorial understanding, part of what it means to know the land thoroughly. The calls change with time of day and season. Morning calls often have a different quality than evening calls, perhaps because the air itself is different, perhaps because the emotional context is different. Winter calls in cold air sound sharper, carry differently than summer calls through warm, heavy air. People adjust unconsciously, changing their calling technique to match conditions, ensuring the sounds they make will travel as effectively as possible, regardless of circumstances. The seasonal and diurnal variations in calling demonstrate how deeply communication integrates with the natural environment. Calls are not produced in isolation from environmental conditions, but in response to them, adjusted to work with, rather than against, the acoustic properties of different atmospheric conditions. This adaptive calling shows sophisticated attunement to how sound behaves in different contexts. And always, the calls maintain the connection between separated people, the acoustic thread that binds a group together, even when they're scattered across vast distances. Without these calls, people would become truly isolated, lose track of each other, face dangers alone that they could manage together. The calls are lifelines, stretching across space, carrying meaning through air, ensuring that even in the largest landscapes, people remain connected through sound. The metaphor of acoustic threads is apt. The calls literally weave connections through space, create lines of communication that prevent separation from becoming isolation. Even when people can't see each other, can't help each other directly, the calls maintain awareness, maintain relationship, ensure that no one is truly alone as long as voices can reach across distance. But distance calls aren't the only way faces communicate. Long before sounds became complex, faces themselves spoke volumes. Expressions cross faces faster than thoughts form. Someone startled, and their face shows it instantly. Eyes wide, mouth open, entire expression transformed in less than a heartbeat. Everyone nearby sees this expression and reads it correctly even before the startled person makes a sound. The face has already communicated danger, surprise, the need for attention. By the time any sound follows, the information has already been received and people are responding. The speed of facial communication is crucial for survival. Expressions convey information faster than vocal communication can, provide instant warning or reassurance, allow groups to respond to changing situations with minimal delay. The face becomes the first channel of communication in sudden situations, with sound following after to provide details and context. Fear writes itself plainly across features, not just the eyes widening, but the particular way the muscles around the eyes tighten, the way the mouth compresses or falls open, the way blood drains from the surface, leaving the skin visibly paler. Others see this and feel their own bodies responding, their own fear rising even before they know what caused the first person's reaction. The face transmits emotion directly, body to body, faster than any other form of communication. The contagion of fear through facial expression serves important survival functions. One person's fear can alert an entire group instantly, putting everyone on high alert before the danger is even identified. This collective response increases the chances that someone will spot the threat, that the group will respond effectively, that everyone will survive the encounter. Anger shows in the face as unmistakably as fear, the tightening around the eyes, but different from fear's tightening, the set of the jaw, the compression of the lips, the slight forward thrust of the head. These signals evolved long before any human existed, shared with other species, written into the body at levels deeper than thought. Reading an angry face requires no teaching. Even infants recognize and respond to angry expressions, pulling back, becoming distressed. The face communicates emotional state with perfect clarity. Anger's clear facial expression serves social regulation functions. The visible display of anger communicates boundaries, indicates when lines have been crossed, warns others to modify their behavior. This visual warning system allows for social correction without physical conflict, makes it possible to address tensions before they escalate to violence. Joy transforms faces completely. The genuine smile that reaches the eyes, creating those small lines at the corners that can't be faked. The way the whole face lifts, opens, becomes brighter. This expression draws others toward the person displaying it, makes them want to know what caused the happiness, want to share in it. Joy is contagious partly because the face makes it so visible, so appealing, so impossible to ignore. The attractiveness of joyful expressions serves social bonding functions. People are drawn to those who display joy, want to be near them, want to participate in whatever is creating the happiness. This gravitational pull of joy helps coordinate group activities, helps ensure that positive experiences are shared rather than individual, strengthens social bonds through collective participation in good moments. Pain has its own facial vocabulary. The grimace, the tightening around the eyes, the way the face seems to contract inward. Others seeing this expression understand immediately that something is wrong, that help may be needed. They move toward the person in pain, their own faces showing concern, creating a visual dialogue of distress and care without any words needed. The pain expression triggers caregiving responses automatically. People see pain on another's face and move to help before conscious decision-making occurs. This automatic response system ensures that injured or ill members receive attention quickly, that pain doesn't have to be explained or requested, that care happens as a natural consequence of visible distress. Confusion shows in the face as a kind of openness, a loosening of features, often accompanied by a slight tilt of the head, raised eyebrows, and almost questioning look. This expression invites clarification, signals to others that more information is needed. People seeing this expression automatically adjust their communication, adding detail, demonstrating more clearly, responding to what the confused face is requesting. The invitation quality of confusion expressions makes them powerful tools for learning. The confused person doesn't have to articulate what they don't understand or admit ignorance verbally. The face does this work automatically, signals the need for clarification, prompts others to provide additional information without any verbal request being made. Concentration creates its own facial expression, the narrowing of focus visible in the eyes, the slight frown that indicates deep thought, the way the face seems to close off external input to focus on internal processing. Others recognize this expression and usually respect it, staying quiet, not interrupting, understanding that the person is working something out mentally and needs space to do so. The concentration face creates a visible boundary, a signal that the person is temporarily unavailable for interaction. This visual "do not disturb" sign allows for mental work to happen without constant interruption, creates protected space for thinking within the social environment of the group. Disgust registers instantly in the face with the curled lip, the wrinkled nose, sometimes the actual gag reflex that starts in the throat but shows in the face. This expression warns others away from whatever caused it. Spoiled food, dangerous substances, anything that should be avoided. The face communicates revulsion so clearly that others don't need to investigate for themselves. They trust the facial expression and stay away. The warning function of disgust expressions prevents others from making the same mistake, from encountering the same danger. One person's disgust protects the entire group, makes individual experience collective knowledge through the simple mechanism of visible facial reaction. Surprise opens the face dramatically. Eyes wide, mouth open, eyebrows raised to their maximum extent. The expression only lasts a moment before shifting to whatever emotion follows the surprise, fear or joy or confusion or curiosity. But in that moment, the face broadcasts that something unexpected has occurred, captures everyone's attention, prepares them for whatever comes next. The attention-capturing function of surprise expressions helps groups respond to novelty collectively. When one person's face shows surprise, everyone else becomes alert, looks to see what caused the reaction, prepares to respond to whatever unexpected event has occurred. Surprise becomes a shared state, coordinating group attention. Skepticism shows in subtle shifts, one eyebrow raised, lips slightly pursed, eyes narrowed slightly. This expression says, "I doubt what I'm seeing or hearing. I need more evidence." It's a questioning face, one that prompts whoever is speaking or demonstrating to provide additional proof or explanation. The skeptical face creates dialogue by expressing uncertainty that demands resolution. Skepticism serves quality control functions in communication. The skeptical face signals that information isn't being accepted uncritically, that the listener requires convincing, that claims need support. This pushes communicators to be more thorough, more careful, more convincing in their presentations. Affection softens all the features, the gentle eyes, the soft smile, the open and relaxed quality of the face when looking at someone cared for. This expression communicates safety, acceptance, love. Children seek this expression on adult faces, are comforted by it, learn to trust the people whose faces show them affection consistently. The affection face creates emotional security, provides the foundation for healthy development in children, strengthens bonds between adults. Seeing affection on another's face triggers feelings of being valued, being safe, being connected, emotions fundamental to well-being and social cohesion. Determination sets the face in a particular way, jaw clenched, eyes focused and hard, a stillness in the features that shows resolve. This expression communicates that a decision has been made, that action will follow, that the person will not be easily dissuaded. Others reading this face understand they're dealing with someone who is committed to a course and will follow through. The determination face can inspire confidence in others or warn them not to interfere, depending on context. It shows internal state made external, makes commitment visible, allows others to adjust their own plans and expectations based on another's evident resolve. Tiredness shows in the face no matter how much someone tries to hide it. The heaviness around the eyes, the slight droop of features, the way the face seems to sag under the weight of exhaustion. Others, seeing this expression, respond with compassion, perhaps take on more of the work, allow the exhausted person to rest. The face reveals what words might not say. The visibility of exhaustion prevents people from pushing beyond safe limits. When tiredness shows in the face, others can intervene, insist on rest, redistribute work to prevent injury or illness that comes from overexertion. The face serves as an honest reporter of physical state, one that can't be overridden by willpower or pride. Relief floods across the face visibly when danger passes or a problem resolves. The sudden relaxation of every muscle, the exhalation that changes the whole expression, the way features that were tight with tension suddenly loosen and open. This expression is contagious. Others, seeing it, feel their own relief, their own tension easing in response. The contagion of relief helps groups transition together from high alert to relaxation, ensures that everyone recognizes when danger has passed, coordinates the collective shift from stress response to recovery mode. Relief spreads through facial expression as efficiently as fear does, but with opposite effect. Faces communicate across distance better than fine gestures can. Even from far enough away that hands and detailed movements are hard to see, a face's basic expression remains readable. The tilt of a head, the body language that accompanies facial expressions, combine to make emotional states visible across significant spaces. People learn to read faces at distance, checking in visually with others even when too far away for sound to carry clearly. The distance readability of facial expressions makes them crucial for coordination in spread-out groups. People working at different locations can still monitor each other's emotional states, can notice if someone shows distress or confusion or needs help, can maintain social connection even across physical separation. And at night, in firelight, faces become almost hypnotic, the shadows and light moving across features, making expressions more dramatic, more visible in some ways than in full daylight. People unconsciously watch faces in firelight, reading the emotions that play across them, the reactions to stories being told, the shifts in feeling that become visible in changed expressions. The face in firelight is a screen on which internal states become external, visible, shared. The dramatic lighting of firelight makes facial expressions more theatrical, more engaging to watch. The moving shadows emphasize changes in expression, make emotions more visible, create a visual spectacle that draws attention and holds it. Faces in firelight become part of the evening's entertainment, part of what makes gathering around fire compelling. Children learn to read faces before they learn anything else. An infant watching a parent's face, learning to distinguish expressions, responding with joy to happy faces, with distress to angry or frightened ones. This is perhaps the very first language any person learns, the language of the face, the vocabulary of expression that requires no words, no sounds, no gestures, just the muscular movements of features into patterns that carry meaning directly from one mind to another. The primacy of facial communication in infant development demonstrates how fundamental it is to human nature. Before words, before complex gestures, before any other form of communication, faces speak and infants understand. This earliest language never loses its importance, continues to underlie all other forms of communication throughout life, and the face, unlike hands or voice, cannot easily lie. The muscles of expression operate partly below conscious control. Genuine emotion leaks through even when someone tries to hide it. Others notice the discrepancy between what a face says and what might later be claimed. Trust the face more, read the truth in involuntary muscular movements that betray internal states, no matter what the person might prefer to show. The honesty of facial expression makes it a trusted channel of communication. People learn to read micro-expressions, fleeting moments when true feeling shows before conscious control suppresses it. This ability to read faces for truth makes deception difficult, helps maintain trust within groups, ensures that emotional reality remains visible even when people try to mask it. This is the foundation, perhaps. Before any other form of communication developed sophistication, faces were already speaking volumes. Every emotional state has its facial counterpart. Every need and fear and joy written in the muscles around eyes and mouth. And reading these faces, responding to them, using one's own face to communicate back, this is perhaps the bedrock on which all other language eventually built itself. The face spoke first and speaks still, sometimes more clearly than anything that follows. The world is never silent. Even in the deepest night, even in the stillest moments, sound exists. And in these sounds, the breath of sleeping people, the crackle of dying embers, the distant call of night creatures, the wind moving through trees or across open ground, there is communication. Not always intentional, not always directed, but always present, always connecting everything that lives to everything else that lives, through the medium of air vibrating, reaching ears, being interpreted, being understood. This is how it begins. This is how it has always begun, with sounds the body makes without thinking, with gestures that paint meaning in air, with faces that cannot hide what they feel, with touch that says more than any sound could say, with silence that speaks as loudly as any voice. And from these foundations, slowly, over time, measured not in years but in generations, in centuries, in millennia, something more complex emerges. Patterns become consistent. Sounds attach to meanings. Children learn what their parents knew and add something new. Each generation builds on what came before, and the structure grows more elaborate, more capable, more precise. But underneath it all, always, are these ancient foundations. The cry of alarm, the laugh of joy, the touch of comfort, the silence of shared attention, the rhythm of work, the warmth of voices around fire, the connection between people who need each other to survive, who choose each other for company, who build their lives together in sound and silence and everything between. The voices rise and fall with the seasons, with the days, with the moments. They carry across distances, and through darkness, they preserve what needs to be remembered and create what needs to be shared. They bind the group together through sound, through the simple, profound act of making noise that means something, that reaches another person, that creates understanding where before there was only separation. And in the end, perhaps this is all language ever really is, a bridge between one mind and another, a way of being less alone, a method of carrying the internal world outward so that others can see it, hear it, feel it, respond to it. The specific sounds matter less than the act of reaching out, of trying to connect, of believing that connection is possible. The fire burns low, voices fade to murmurs, bodies settle into rest, and the night closes around the group, holding them in darkness that is not empty, but full of breath and warmth and presence, full of the small sounds of being alive together, full of the silence that says everything is well, everyone is here, the group endures. Tomorrow, there will be more sounds, more teaching, more laughter, more coordination of effort, more refinement of the emerging patterns, more children learning, more innovations spreading through the group. The process continues, has always continued, will always continue as long as people live together and need to communicate. But tonight, there is rest. There is the sound of breathing synchronized unconsciously. There is the occasional murmur of someone dreaming. There is the wind outside and the warmth inside. There is the knowledge, held without words, that tomorrow will come, and with it, all the sounds of life beginning again. This is how language lives, not in rules or structures or formal definitions, but in the space between people, in the breath that becomes sound, in the sound that becomes meaning, in the meaning that creates connection, in the connection that makes survival not just possible but bearable, even beautiful. The voices of the past are silent now, lost to time, irretrievable, but the patterns they created, the foundations they laid, the connections they forged, these remain in every word spoken today, in every gesture made, in every face that shows what it feels, in every touch that comforts, in every silence that speaks. The thread runs unbroken from then to now, from the first sounds made with intention to every conversation happening at this moment. The same need, the same reaching out, the same hope that meaning can cross the space between one person and another. And it does. It always has. It always will. As long as there are people, there will be communication. As long as there is communication, there will be connection. As long as there is connection, there will be hope. The night deepens, the breathing slows, the fire becomes ash, and in the darkness, in the silence that is not quite silence, the ancient patterns continue, the rhythm of breath, the warmth of proximity, the sound of being alive, together, in this moment that stretches back to the beginning and forward to whatever comes next. This is the language that matters most, the language of presence, of breath and warmth and shared existence, of sounds that mean because people agree they mean, of meanings that persist because they matter enough to be carried forward. And somewhere, in all of this, in the space between sound and silence, between intention and instinct, between the individual and the group, language exists. Not as a thing, but as a process. Not as an achievement, but as a continuous becoming. Not finished, never finished, always growing, always changing, always adapting to the needs of the people who use it. The voices rise, the voices fall, the communication continues. And in that continuation, in that endless cycle of sound and response, of reaching out and being heard, the ancient human need for connection finds its answer, always has, always will.